And
There.
there we go.
Okay. Okay. Well, so I guess that will just be private between us. Okay. So, and then also just by way of saying a little bit more about us, we've supported our clients in numerous instances to win awards, whether they're Digital Cities Awards, GFOA Awards, and so forth. And we're very proud of that, of supporting them and doing that. And then we've also won a number of awards ourselves, including being on the GovTech 100 for the last 5 years and being selected as a top company by ELGL too. We work with governments of all sizes and actually all around the world. These just happen to be some of our larger governments that are here in the US, but we also have very large cities and small cities throughout Canada and Australia, New Zealand, and in the United Kingdom. And then now coming to ARPA funds. So that's, I think that's probably what attracted most of you, especially those of you who are new to our company, want to come in and sort of learn about what we've got. So ARPA has been a game changer for US governments, state and local county school districts. It's really been a lifeline after a really tough year. And there's a number of things that need to be done. I mean, one, you need to convey that it's one-time money. You want to have citizen buy-in for what you're doing. We've heard from a lot of governments that they're worried about the messaging of this, that the headlines say local government is getting $350 billion. And they're concerned that may make people may think, well, therefore we can have a tax increase, or we don't need to approve a bond referendum, for example. We've got a big city in Virginia that is looking to do some flood mitigation, and they need voters to say yes to that. And so they're just kind of worried about the messaging. And so one thing that our tools can do is to help put some meaning behind that, so you can actually communicate with people, educate people, and hopefully get their buy-in for what you're trying to do. But even if regardless of all that, the U.S. Treasury, which is one of the sources of these funds, is really encouraging that local governments engage their constituents and communities in making some of these decisions. And we've been doing work really for the last 5 or 6 months to help provide some of these tools. And if you're interested, there's a nice Alliance for Innovation webinar that we did with the city of Greensboro and the city of Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, not too long ago. And we'll send that out to you in a link afterwards. It's a really nice webinar from June. All right. When you all signed up for this, we asked you to tell us, what have you been doing with your to engage the public on your stimulus funds. And I wrote down, this is almost all the answers, but the most common one was nothing, which is understandable. This is kind of new, and it's not only are the funds new, this approach of how do you have a meaningful involvement with people, how do you have a meaningful series of conversations with people about the budget, about budgetary and financial issues is new. And so nothing is the most common answer, but there's also a lot of public meetings, town halls, initiated planning, shared information, email surveys, et cetera, and also including nonprofits. I think that's one of the major benefits of the ARPA bill, is that it includes some help for nonprofits that can be passed through. But my favorite response was that somebody said that it opened up a Pandora's box, and we hear this all the time. It's like, why would I want to engage residents in thinking through these complex issues? And a lot of public officials think that it just makes more trouble. And that's an understandable response. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be that way. And that's really, when I was talking earlier about the internet and simulations, especially online simulations, create this new opportunity for a new kind of a conversation. And so this is what we've learned. This is kind of our distilled knowledge from the last 8 or so years of working in budget engagement. Is that you need to provide 3 things, and they all happen to start with C, so we call them the 3 C's, and that is that you want to provide constraints. And so if you're talking about a general budget, you need to let people know that there is a fixed amount of dollars, or at least that the spending needs to match up against the revenues. If it's doing ARPA engagement, that there's a fixed sum. Maybe it's not even the entire ARPA allocation, but there's a fixed sum that you can't spend more than. So you want to provide those constraints. Some ARPA can't be used for certain things. And so to just convey those things is a really important thing. Context. This is one that's really critically important. And we hear this all the time from some of our researchers that are looking at what makes for high quality engagement, and to provide context and understanding for why a government is doing something, why it's spending money on something, and to have sort of detailed drillable layers of context can be really useful in that. And what we found is that when people understand something, they tend to support it. And this last one is consequence. So to illustrate that a cut it does not is not without a consequence. So if you were to cut libraries, for example, that might mean that library hours need to be cut. And then just the obvious that if you fund one thing and you don't have enough money for the second thing, well, the second thing doesn't get done. And so these 3 C's we found to be sort of just a useful way of kind of testing your engagement to see if you're really kind of set up for maximum success. So we're going to show you 2 tools today. The one on the left is called Simulate. It's our older tool. In internet years, it's ancient. It was started in 2015, but it's been pretty much completely redone probably a couple times over since then. And then on the right is Prioritize, which is our brand new one, which is nice for a lot of reasons. It's simplicity. It can be built in under an hour, and they both have their place. I'm going to give you some examples of US governments that have used both of those for ARPA engagement. But the one thing I want to just mention, because these have been some crazy times, in the last year and a half, is that sometimes people think of budget engagement or just public engagement in general as almost like a survey. It's like, oh, we want to know what people's priorities are, and we actually view it as a much richer opportunity than that. We view it as an opportunity to educate, for people to learn from each other, to learn about facts, and to engage differently. But probably more importantly, especially given the whipsaw that a lot of U.S. governments have been on, with last year being horrible. Oh, sorry. Something's going on here, I'm not sure what it is. With last year being horrible for a lot of governments, and this year having some unexpected bounty, that we really view budget engagement as an opportunity for leadership, and that our tools are intended to support leading a conversation, a meaningful conversation about what to do with valuable financial resources. And in some ways, one of the first things I said when we started this was that we started out as a facilitation company that did public policy facilitation. Really, we view our 2 tools as facilitation tools to help you lead a conversation, a public conversation with thousands of people if you want, or we even have a lot of our entities are using it internally, and they're using our tools with 8 or 10 people, but really a facilitation tool and a leadership tool to help you get to a place where you're using your financial resources, you're using these benefits in a way that's got maximum advantage to the entire public entity. Now, I'm going to go to a demo. So let me pull up a couple of different examples. So the first example I'm going to give you is actually not from ARPA, but it's the same concept, and they just did such a nice job. I just kind of wanted to lead off with them. This is Frederick County, Maryland, and that happens to be a video that's featuring Jan Gardner, the Frederick County executive. She's also an elected official. And she's using balancing act simulation, and she's starting out by just sort of explaining why they would like to have some input. And in this instance, is because as a county, they did a really nice job with budgeting conservatively when they forecast a downturn in 2020. And what that meant was that when property taxes did not go down, they had a decent amount of money that they could use to put towards some additional supplemental requests. And so they had about $10 million, and they wanted to get public input on how to use that. And so they sort of contextualize that, and then they invite people to look at this $10 million potential surplus, and then to provide some input on how to spend it. And so over here on the right side, you've got spending, and that corresponds with this donut chart. And then over here, you've got unallocated funds. This is actually what they've started, their starting amount. But then over here, they just sort of presented a series of options. So everything starts out at 0. And so they talk about Board of Education requests. And so the context is provided through these blue info icons. So you can click on that, and you can get just a little bit of information about that, and sort of find out kind of a top level. And then they provide a number of different options down here. So they've got 32 academic support teachers, and then they have a price for that, $2.4 million. They describe what that is here, and then they use our more details function to say just a little bit more about what that could look like. This particular feature can be used for pictures, it can be used for graphs, it can be used for live visualizations, all sorts of things. And so if you wanted that one, you'd simply select it. And so it takes that $2.4 million, and it actually adds it to your spending, and then it reduces your available funds by that much as well. And so you can do the same thing down here with 23 school counselors, et cetera. You could go down to a different item like public library. That I think that happened. That's almost always the favorite is public library. But you could say increase funding for library materials. You could have 2 part-time library assistants, et cetera. Public safety. One of the things that we've seen a lot is looking especially in this era where there's some natural disasters such as the one we just saw Hurricane Ida is to focus on rescue requests and first responders and things like that. And so the idea here is that you can basically choose these and spend down this $3.5 million. And then on the back end, we give you this really nice information that sort of collects this information and shows you an aggregate of what people did, and it shows you how they balanced available funds with their priorities. Now, this is a great example of using our simulation tool when you actually know the cost of things. We realize we've heard from a number of you who have said that you actually don't know the cost of some of the things that you're thinking about using stimulus money from, which is just fine. We've got some good examples of that as well. So I'm going to take us now to Elk Grove, California. That's in the Central Valley of California. They're a very innovative, cool city. They do a lot of great public engagement work, and they used our simulation in a slightly different way. This is their entry screen. I think they're trying to include their entire community by using some different languages, and then they just give a quick little tutorial on how to use it. And then let's see, I'm just going to X out of this. And then they present some options that are kind of ARPA eligible things to spend money on. So once again, everything starts with 0. And on the revenue side over here, you've got the federal funding, and you've got that locked so that people can't change that. So that's conveying that constraint. And then over here, the way they've set this up is that they've got various categories. So they've got recovery assistance for community programs, restoration of revenues, disadvantaged community support, et cetera. And instead of starting with a price, they're really asking which of these programs should we direct these new funds to? And so you could say, I think that workforce development is a really key thing, and especially after you learn about it and find out what that could look like. So you've got some good description of that. And then you can start allocating the funds. You can just start, clicking, and it goes up by $100,000 per click. That's completely customizable. You could have it go up much faster if you want. You could also have it go up by a percentage. And then you can go and you can say local government, restoring local government services, et cetera. And then you can see that all gets displayed live up here and also depicted in the graph. So prior to about 2, maybe 3 months ago, this was kind of our only option. It may be the best option. It is the best option for many governments, but it was our only option that we had. But then we also just released a brand new tool called Prioritize. And it's nice in a lot of ways. It's simpler, it's very visual. And the other nice thing about it is it's really easy to make. So a simulation, depending on how complex you want to make it, it can take a couple days, a day, a couple days. Prioritize is really simple. You can actually make it in under an hour, and it's a really nice way to share choices with residents or with your stakeholders and constituents, and then get some really detailed information about what should be included. So I'm just going to skip through this. They're asking just some simple questions: are you a resident, et cetera. And the way that this works is that you've got an available amount of money, in this case, $2.3 million. This is Upper Moreland School District in Pennsylvania. And this is, I think they've got about 6 schools. And so they have about $2.3 million that they wanted input from the public on. And so you can go down here and you can learn about the various things. You can learn about continued virtual learning for elementary students at $475,000. Well, if you want to get a little bit more information, this is the same data structure as we have on the simulation. You click on this and it says option for continued virtual program for K-12 students. And you say, well, I think, my kid, did well on that, or I think that should be a good option. So you can select it. When you select it, it gives you a big check mark there. It tells you just spent that money, and now you've got less money available. So same thing by moving down, you can look at, the summer 22 program and at $130,000. And if you select that, that takes another $130,000. You could do, some capital upgrades, like, some security vestibule type of stuff, and learn about what that is. You can select that. Personal protective equipment for staff, school upgrades. You don't have enough money for that because that's a $2 million item. And then you could just kind of, make your selections and so forth. And then once you get the selections that you want, so essentially what this does is it says within a budget, within an amount of money that we want some public input on, or want some stakeholder involvement on, you can select what should be included. But then you can go down here and you can say, okay, within those items that I've included, there are some that I think are really important. So you could actually drop in there, drag, and you could say, I think technology is really the most important one. And then I think we also should have some PPE available and so forth. And so the CFO from this the school district used it over the summer. He said it was very useful, and he said that we plan on using it throughout the next school year, not just with the public, but even internally for supplementals and for internal conversations. We've got some other school districts that are thinking about using this almost at the school level. Like if maybe a high school has $5,000 that it could be used, that could be allocated to get involvement from students or parents or teachers and so forth. I want to show you another one that's a little bit more relevant to, it's sort of a larger type of a budget. This is just a sample that we made for a county that uses some visualizations. We just want to kind of show you, a number of you had mentioned to us that you're thinking about doing dashboards. This is a really nice way of getting some additional sort of bang per buck out of whatever dashboards or whatever visualizations you're using. In this particular one, it's using our drop a pin feature. So you can ask questions of people. You can say, are you a resident? Yes. Sometimes people don't like, most of the time, people don't like giving their physical address online, which is understandable, but very often they'll give you their zip code. And then if they'll give you their zip code, we have a feature that allows people to drop a pin. So you can say, okay, this pin got put right in the middle of where that zip code is. And then we just ask people, would you just tell us about where you live? Just drop a pin. And what this does on the back end is it allows us to make a heat map that shows where everybody dropped their pin. And then on the detailed CSV, on the detailed spreadsheet, it actually gives longitude and latitude. So we're going to continue. And then it's kind of the same idea, but it just, there's some special features of this one I just want to show you a little bit more about. So you've got City Hall accessibility, and you can click here and you can learn about that and find out that in 2017 that there was a report that was done that made some valuable recommendations. And this is where if you do have visualizations or you've got some kind of a graph or picture, this is a really nice place to put that. This particular simulation, or this particular prioritize, uses the capital module from a company called Questica. They make budget software, and it's really nice because you just grab the URL from up here and you drop it into the back end of Balancing Act. You've got a picture, you've got a description, you find out that it's ARPA eligible, you get a little bit of background, whatever they wanted to include, and then you can just see, get some good information. And so you can say, well, I think I would like to include that. At the same time, this band shell roof repair, not a very big item, but I think it'd be really useful. Maybe get people outside a little bit. Here's some window repair. Here's some streetlight poles, etc. And so we've used up $1 million, not too much left, but we could do a little bit more. We could do this archaeological reporting. I'm not even sure what that is, but I can click right here and find out. And then you can go down here and you can, once again, do that prioritization. Now, I want to show you what this looks like on the back. Well, let me show you what it looks like when you submit. So you submit, it gives you a chance to reprioritize things if you wish. And then it can ask a couple of questions, and male, female, not under 18, that might be obvious to people. And then you can click on it. And by the way, this is all fully accessible. And then it tells you what you just did. Now on the back end, you can you get some really amazing reporting, and our developer just did an amazing job with setting this up. So it tells you how many page views that you had, how many people actually submitted, and then the submission rate. Now this is just a sample, so I wouldn't take these actual numbers too much to heart. But the first thing it does is it gives you a report on the unweighted total. So not taking into account that dropping and dragging up and down, and it shows you what was included. So you've got the band shell roof repair, and you've got the light poles and the fire hall replacement. Well, down here, you can actually look at the weighted report. And so if you look at the weighted report, you've got the park street light poles, you've got the pathway, you've got roof repair, and then a fire hall replacement. And then you can kind of toggle between the two if you want. But it's just another way of giving you even finer grained detail about what people's real preferences are, and how you might be able to use this money wisely that would satisfy a lot of priorities and needs that people in the community are feeling. One of the other things I really like about this is that, let me just refresh this here, is that you can go over here, and there's a way to show a consensus analysis. So you can click on this, and it will show you that if you were to make these 4 selections, that 54 voters, or 98%, would see at least one of their choices included. 76% would have at least 2. So once again, just a really nice way to kind of be in touch with people's preferences, and sort of test the ability of a certain package to satisfy stakeholder concerns. We also give you, some of you who've been watching New York and the instant runoff voting. We provide instant runoff voting as another way for you to understand what people said on prioritize here too. So you've got the various rounds, and the way that this works is that at each stage in each round, it drops off the lowest supported item. And so let me just skip ahead to like round 6. And it keeps on, the rounds keep on going until you get under your budget. And so at this point, you're almost there, but if you go to round 7, you actually are under your budget. And these are the 3 items that were selected using this instant runoff voting approach. This is just a depiction of what everybody said by which rank. So if, once again, another way of sort of understanding preferences. And then down here, there's this really interesting kind of new way of looking at what residents did. It's called Condorcet, and essentially what it does is it creates a head-to-head matchup on all the items, and then it shows you what comes out on top. And once again, it's pretty similar to what you saw above. It just gives you a different way of looking at it. And one of the other nice things about this is that this is all real time. So if you were to have a meeting face-to-face or online, you can actually look at these results and then have a conversation about it, and then people could, sort of, discuss it, what might be the wisest package. And we think that that's a really wise thing. So I'm going to turn over to Garrett in just a moment, but before I do, I just want to invite questions, and Amy and Peter are on, and I don't know if they've seen any questions or have any questions that they want to ask before we learn how to use this thing.
I don't see any questions yet in the chat.
Okay.
So.
Good. So Garrett, why don't you just give us a quick tutorial and show us how these things can be built? Because I know a lot of times, especially public officials are incredibly busy, and they're concerned about implementing big software systems. And one thing that we always like to tell people is that it's not like implementing a big software system, an installed system, or anything else. It's much more like SurveyMonkey in terms of ease of use. So Garrett, show us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the really cool thing about the back end is that, as Chris alluded to earlier, that you can really create this all under an hour. So what I'm going to do is just highlight the features of the prioritize tool. So here, this is your dashboard. You'll get this once you sign up. You go down to the left-hand side, you'll click on prioritize. And here we'll just create a new prioritization. We'll give it a name, today's date and demo, continue. And now you'll see that we actually have 2 entry points of data. So we have items, and then we have exit and entry screens. So the items, as a reminder, items are these nice, really beautiful looking tiles associated with numbers. And then the exit and entry screens, Chris actually showed this as well. This is where you can kind of customize this with videos, text, images, and then you can even have this really cool drop a pin feature, as he alluded to earlier, where you can kind of drag and drop. And let's say I live closer to the Denver Zoo here. So those are the 2 entry points of data for the prioritization tool. Now I'm going to go back to items. So the way you can implement data, you can do so in 2 ways. So you can add items via manually, or you can add items via CSV export or import. So here, we'll just start with adding an item manually. So we'll say our available funds, let's just say 10 million. And then from there, we'll click on the add an item button, and we're going to give a name to the first tile or item. So we'll say, let's build a playground. And the cost of that, let's say 90,000. And now I'm going to click over here, and this is details. So this is, again, where you can type in additional text and add images and videos per item. Here, the first thing you actually see is the ability to categorize these. And just for the sake of time, I'm just going to keep it uncategorized. So for here, let's say the playground will be built on the corner of Main Street. So that's where text can be implemented. And then here in the more detailed section, you can, again, plug in videos, images, whatever you'd like. So what I see a lot of clients using now is just kind of implementing links just to give residents more details on that. So we'll just put read this link, and we'll say benefits of playgrounds. Then I will go and grab a link from the CDC, go back in there. Really nice and easy just to plug that in there. Format it a little bit, Maybe I'll bold that. So now scroll down to the last portion here is images. So you're allowed to upload images just from your desktop or laptop, or we actually have this really cool API function that allows us to grab free stock photos from Unsplash. So here, we'll just click on search. Let's look for playground images, click search. And here we actually get pages and pages of potential photos we can use. So let's just select one here. That one looks pretty nice. Then just gonna move the little camera thing over here. Image has been uploaded. Let's click done. And now we're back here. So as you can see how quickly, if I already have my information and the amount, it's really easy just to add it manually. And now I'm going to show you how to import the rest of the items via CSV. So here, just want to show you what the CSV will look like. So the CSV import has required and optional portions that you need to upload. So here for the required, we'll need a category, subcategory, and amount associated with each item. And then some optional things you can add are more info and more details. So now going back to here, we're just gonna import from CSV. I already have one built. So we'll open that. And as you can see how quickly that is all imported. So I have all my subcategories like build sidewalks, expand broadband, and then some of these actually have more info associated with them. And the only thing that doesn't upload is just images. So going back, we can always just go in here, click edit. All my costs are there, my details, if I want to add details, but I can go back and find a nice picture of the library. And we'll go with that one. Click select, click done, and there it is. So now we have all our tiles populated and 2 images are associated. So now, before we go and preview what it looks like, I just want to go and kind of spruce up the entry and exit screens. So as I scroll down, the first option you have here are entry questions. So you can create questions, you can make questions required. Here we already have one that's pre-populated. Are you a resident? So you can unclick that, include it or not. We'll include it here. And then the exit screen, these are the questions that Chris also showed in the demo of questions that are asked after submitting. So do you want to find age range, gender, zip code, all that? You can make some required, include them, or just go ahead and create your own here. So now I'm going to scroll down here. I really recommend always having this enable drop a pin feature, and that again really allows you to then collect that data, latitude, longitude, heat map of where your residents are answering. So I'll enable that, and then it's really easy here just to add a nice entry screen modal here, just for aesthetic purposes, really. So we'll say we need to hear from you. I'll highlight that. I like to center it. Let's make it a header. And then this is where a lot of clients like to plug in videos that they've made because it is powerful coming from a city manager, city council, etc. So I will actually go and grab an existing one. We have a great video from the city of Williamsburg. Just going to copy that over. Go back in here. Really easy to embed. You just click that embed URL, embed it, save, and it automatically embeds in there. And I will click the save button. So now that we have entered our items, we have kind of played around with the exit and entry screens. Let's go ahead and preview. So once you preview here, now you can see everything that we added. Welcome to Balancing Act. We need to hear from you. The video's in there. They'll play automatically within the modal. And this is a really good video. Then I can click continue. And then these are the questions that we kept. Yes, enter your postal code 80206. Really easy for the resident to then just drag and drop, as Chris highlighted earlier. Continue. And now, as you can see, our available funds that we typed in, there's 10 million. And then all the items that we uploaded are in here. Obviously, some of them don't have photos because we only manually plugged in 2. But here, that build a playground one, the one that I entered manually originally, you can go in here, click the nice little info tab. That's what we typed in. It's going to be built on the corner of Main Street. Click on more details, read, let's see what the benefits of playgrounds are. So this is where you plug in extra videos, images, links, and all that. So I'll just go ahead and start selecting. So we go there, let's renovate the library, improve accessibility, solar panels. And so now I've selected 7.8 million and I have 2.2 remaining. But let's say those are just the ones I'm really interested in. And then again, as Chris highlighted earlier, drag and drop, submit, and then I'd submit that. So basically, it's really the tool itself. For once you have the data, it's really easy and you can get this spun up really quickly. And this is something that you'd have technical support on. Like I will be your primary contact moving forward. We can strategize, work together on this, even screen share and kind of build one moving forward. So it's not like we're giving you the tool and you just and saying good luck. We want you to be successful. So we'll be here hand in hand with you while you're building this. But yeah, I just wanted to quickly show you how easy this can really be built.
Yeah, that's terrific, Garrett. Thank you for kind of walking us through that. And the simulation uses the same data structure, and it's a little bit more complex, but it's also relatively easy to make. The prioritize is relatively easy to make. The simulation is straightforward to make, but it'll take a little bit more work. So I just want to see if there's any questions. I think I saw some. Amy and Peter, did you see any that we might want to just discuss a little bit?
Yeah, I think a couple of good ones. So one is, how do you qualify / validate the responses, and how do you prevent someone from replying more than once? And another one is
let's just take them one at a time. Okay. Let me do that one. So that's a good question, and it's a question we get all the time. It's sort of a perennial question in public engagement. Is if you're doing face-to-face engagement, is it the people who show up? And is that okay that you don't hear from people who don't show up? Even among the people who show up, is it the person with the loudest voice who gets the most attention? When in online engagement, it's a little bit of a different question. So there are some, there's some ideas that you could have about sort of qualifying people and validating, is somebody a resident? And there's actually some software out there that will do that. We've discussed with our existing clients if they wanted something like that. And when you look at the trade-off between potentially limiting somebody's access to the simulation or to the prioritized tool and limiting that educational opportunity and also not getting their input versus putting some kind of a control on there, our clients have always chosen to just go ahead and let people use it. I don't know if there is a right answer there exactly or not, but because our tools have such educational value and because the value of participation, I think, is seen as having great value, that's always the direction that we've gone. Now, we do have some plans. We actually, we've never had a taker on it to build some software that would validate somebody and, validate an email address or even validate somebody if somebody's a resident or a voter, for example, but no one has ever really taken us up on that. Now, with the existing software, though, we do collect IP addresses. And so you can look and see if there's a suspicious pattern. But one thing that really hasn't been such an issue is that there have really only been 2 instances in all of our 6 years or so of using the simulation where it's appeared that there was a problem. And it was pretty obvious. So on the simulate software, we give you the mode. So the mode is the most popular selected item. And when they have that, you can actually see if there might be somebody trying to game an issue, or whether 1 or 2 people or a small number of people are having disproportionate input. So I guess my answer to you is it's a little bit muddy, but we do give you some tools to kind of detect if there might be something untoward. But I can tell you it doesn't really seem to happen very much. And we work with some of the biggest governments in the country. So, and if you have a follow-up question, please go ahead. What else, Amy?
Another good one was just, is there a timing feature? Do you leave the simulation or the prioritize up? How long do you leave it up?
Yeah, so I would say that the different answer for both prioritize and for simulate. So prioritize really is kind of time limited. It's like, okay, we've got this, $1.7 million, and we've got about $4 million worth of things, and we want to have some responses in the next 3 to 4 weeks. That one is sort of geared, obviously, to what your threshold is for getting input on how to spend it. Now, simulate is a different deal. So simulate is by far, I think, the best way to do budget engagement and budget education. And so what you can do is you can make a version of the simulation that might accompany a city manager's budget or a county manager's budget or mayor or superintendent and before it goes to the elected board and then get an opportunity to get some input. Or you could and then have it open for maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks, something like that. But typically what happens is that our customers see the educational value of the budget is that after the budget's passed, they might update it a little bit and then leave it up. And they might just put a statement on that this is for educational purposes. And, please join us next October when we do the next year's budget. And we'll, both have this educational opportunity for you. And then we also are seeking your input.
Great. Right. And then a quick question on how governments share this information. What do you get on the back end, and how is that shared? Sure.
Let me show you a couple of opportunities with that. So this is our website. There's an awful lot of information. So if you're interested in learning more about budget engagement in general, come take a look. We talk about solutions, and we talk about some things that our customers have done down here, and there's some videos and so forth. You can see the launch pages of certain places. But if you go over here to learn, there's just a lot of resources. And so I'm going to scroll down here to where it says results reporting. And there's a lot of different results. So our top two are really sort of a study and contrasts. So the city of Tacoma, these are all public documents. The city of Tacoma has a really detailed, in some ways kind of numbers heavy presentation. Well, I don't know if it's numbers. It's got a lot of numbers, but it's also got a lot of text. It's a really nice report that their staff created for their council. And you can take a look at that if you want. But I'll just say, because public engagement is probably more of an art than a science. This is the one that I tend to reference the most when people ask about examples of reports. This is Syracuse City School District. It comes from their CFO. And so they just sort of talk about what they did. They talk about the meetings that they had, the sessions that they had. They talk about how many people participated. And then they provide some comments from people about why they about their experience with budget engagement. And like this one, this is a wonderful way of making us parents feel involved in the part, Delaware Primary School, et cetera. And then they get to some results reporting. So they actually take a snapshot of what people were asked, and then they go over here and they give the results and the comments, and then they can have a bit of a discussion about it. So I think this is just a nice example, just kind of straightforward. One thing that we always tell our clients, sometimes we get a CFO or a budget director or a city manager who might say, this is my job. I'm the one who's supposed to make the budget. And, say, yeah, that's true. But, at the same time, there are some public facing issues generally, and especially last year with the shortfalls a lot of places felt. And then this year with these new ARPA funds that have sort of a high profile and not, the Treasury guidance notwithstanding, that you don't need to get your input on everything, or you don't need public input on everything, but there are some key issues. And so what this allows you to do, once again, just sort of, linking this back to the first part of the presentation, is to connect with, to treat this as a leadership opportunity, to facilitate a conversation that can help you and your stakeholders move to a good place that's, wise expenditure of funds, that's got some high level of support. All right, what else you got?
I think we've caught up with our questions.
I'm looking over in the other side. It asks if they can get a personal demo, like for them and some colleagues, and that's absolutely the case. In just a sec, I'll show a slide that has some contact information. You can get in touch with Peter and Amy. They're available to give demos and to answer questions. And then the other question is, how much time does it take? So typically we take an hour because, if we don't need it all, we won't use it. But, there's a fair amount to look at, especially, if we start digging into the analytics, and we can show you use cases. We can show you, I know that there are a number of communications officers that are on this webinar. We can show you some great examples of, public radio, of commercial TV, of tweets and social media and all sorts of things like that.
Chris, we just had another question real quick. How is the tool used to gather feedback on a proposed budget?
So that's that's actually kind of the bread and butter of what we do. On this particular call, we sort of focused on the ARPA tools, but it's a similar concept. Let me just see if I can pull something up really quick here. Let me show you. And this is probably a subject of another webinar, or even if you want to have a private conversation, a private demo, just let us know. This is the city of San Jose, California, and they use that drop of a pin feature that Garrett was showing you that I really like, and so forth. And then you continue. And then they basically are saying, this is last year. So they're starting out in a deficit. And so they talk about their revenue over here, property tax, sales tax, et cetera. And then they talk about their various expenditure items, and they do a nice mix and match of using this plus minus approach with also having some additional scenarios, like a possible increase or decrease for fire and emergency medical services. And the task here, which is really to get to the point that the question that Peter articulated, is that they need to get it to they need to get the budget balanced, and then they can submit. So in fact, this is kind of the first use case for our simulation, but it's also very easily adapted for something targeted, such as ARPA funds. But that's a really good question, and one that we would actually love to talk to you about. We could talk to you about it for about 6 hours if you want. What else? Anything?
I think we're caught up on.
Okay, well, let me just show a couple of additional things. I'm going to show my screen, and then we'll kind of close this out unless there are some comments or questions. I did just remember I wanted to show you. I'm not going to do didn't really set up to do a full live backup, but this is what the output looks like for Simulate. And so it gives you 4 types of information. So it gives you the submitted people, that's the gold bar, people that do the simulation but don't submit, that's the teal bar. And then this yellow line is the median, so the middle point that was selected. And then we also give you the mode, it looks like is blacked out, is not shown in this, but the mode is the one that can help you detect if you might just have a number of people that are going in and selecting just one thing. But I did want to show you a couple more things here before we close this out. This is a recommendation from, it's actually from Shane Kavanaugh, and he's the director of research at GFOA. And they came out with a book. It kind of got overshadowed, to be honest, because of the pandemic, but it has, I think, a really wise statement in there. So even though, just kind of linking this to that last question about general budget engagement, they're recommending, and these folks are the folks that have their thumbs on the pulse, or their finger on the pulse of a lot of local governments, is that public engagement become more of a part of what government does. Public engagement on the budget, especially, it really isn't something. And this call, I think, mostly has U.S. governments on it, but in other parts of the country, in Canada and Australia, it really is more of a sort of the practice of the budget adoption is to really do something beyond just a budget hearing or a budget survey. And I think GFOA is really starting to recommend that, and to not just do it when in really good times or really bad times. And like I said, in the last year, we've had the really good times, we've had the really bad times, but to really just make it something that you do as a matter of course, as a matter of governance. And we're starting to see more and more U.S. governments and school districts and et cetera doing that. And I think that's a really wise thing. So I just wanted to sort of point this out to you. And it's also an excellent book. It's called Financial Foundations for Thriving Communities, if you all are looking for something to read in this area. And then the next thing I want to mention is, because so many of you mentioned that for ARPA, you're doing town halls, and town halls in the last year had possibly come to mean something different. This is what it meant pre-pandemic, and hopefully this is what it'll mean again, is that people can actually come together and have conversations with each other face to face, but in some cases they're not. But I want to show you there's an adaptation of our simulation in particular called meeting mode that allows you to use the simulation in large face-to-face, kind of real-time groups. So in this instance, there's about 400 people, and they're working through the budget, and they've got one laptop. And because they're using our meeting mode, their results are going to be shown immediately up here on the screen. It's actually really a cool thing. But because this is, the pandemic is sticking around a little bit, much longer than we all want it to, it can also be used online very effectively. This is the city of Tacoma and their budget director, et cetera. And so both the simulation and prioritize can be used very well in both a real-time face-to-face, a real-time online, or even a real-time hybrid. And so, because I know that the town halls really are the staples of public engagement, this is actually a facilitation tool to help those be productive and meaningful, and to give people a satisfying way to participate, and to give you a good way to actually understand what they're saying. And here's the slide I was alluding to. So if you're interested in learning more, let us know. So use this email address, sales@balancingact.com. You can call this number 877-0111, and I will connect you. That actually goes to me, but I'll connect you to either Peter or Amy. Our website is balancingact.com. And we'll also be sending a link to this recording and a link to this deck out to everybody, so that if you want to share it with colleagues, you can. And we're more than happy to do a demo for you, or a webinar or something like that, if you have some colleagues that want to learn about it. So I'm seeing in the chat and the Q&A, are there any new things?
Yeah, I think, and this might be something that if anybody else wanted to chime in, they're a little bit more broad based. ARP funds were established, I presume, with the intent of assisting the most affected populations in restoring some normalcy post COVID-19. Has any city that you're familiar with been successful at planning on doing just that? And how committed are most local governments in supporting these most affected populations? I was hoping to hear some excellent and sincere efforts to support communities that were most harmed or marginalized. So I don't know if we want to, I thought that might be a good question to ask, everyone who's on here. And if anybody has been successful, chime in, but I'll turn it over to you first, Chris.
Yeah, no, and if you all do have some examples of that, that would be great. I can tell you from a tools perspective, we actually have a really nice tool. It's called our impact feature that can be used to show it can be used to show if a particular budget decision, whether it's on the revenue side or the spending side, has an impact on equity. Now, the hard part becomes, how do you decide when a budget decision has an impact on equity or not? And I'll just give you two examples. So, last year when the George Floyd murder happened, a lot of people were very concerned about the role of police, and in particular, there's a fairly generally acceptable idea. I know it's hard to implement, but this idea that there should be like mental health first responders, so that if somebody calls 911, that it's not the only response that a police officer would show up, that it might be the case that a social worker would show up. And hard to do. There's been several cities in the US that have done something with that, and that's been sort of a useful thing. And so a lot of places were saying, I'd like to have this as a budget option. And so if our software allows you to say, okay, if you do that, you're moving the budget towards equity. So that's something on the software side that we can do easily. We haven't had anybody actually take us up on it. We're eager. So if there's anybody out there that wants to work on something like that, we're eager. Another one that could be useful, or another example of a feature, this actually comes right out of GFOA, is looking on the revenue side, looking at fees and fines. So a lot of cities and counties have some constraints over tax rates and what rates they can increase. And so that's meant in some cases that they've funded a lot of things through fees and fines, whether it's parking tickets or user fees. And there's been some evidence that that's regressive, that actually hurts equity. It harms lower income people more. And so there is a way that if you wanted to move your government away from a reliance on fees and fines, that it could actually show up on the simulation as being moving towards equity. So there's a lot of different ways you can do this. And we've made a lot of tools. Our tools can be used for all sorts of different things. And if there is somebody out there who would like to work with us on that, I can guarantee you'd get some special attention from us, because we'd really like to see how this could work. And I don't know if anybody else has come up with an answer to that since I was going on here. Any more chats or Q&As?
No, I think we're caught up.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. It's a real pleasure. We feel very fortunate to be able to do this work, and to be kind of at the forefront of technology that can help with meaningful public engagement on very difficult and important issues like the budget, and in some ways fortunate issues like how to make good use of stimulus funds. We're also working on a version of Balancing Act that's going to roll out in the Bay Area. Well, it's actually been rolling out already in California, but it's going to roll out, in a fairly large way in the Bay Area pretty soon. That uses an adaptation for our simulation that has a map attached, and it can be used for housing conversations. And so stay tuned if you're interested in that. It's a really important one in terms of thinking about affordable housing, whether it's a place like California or a place like Texas. It's an issue all across the country. So stay in touch with us. And if you have any ideas or questions, please let us know. Let us know if you're interested in learning more about how you can use these tools by emailing us, or just reach out if you want to chat. So once again, great. Thank you to the team for helping put this on, and thank you all for your participation. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you.